这个地球上还能找出第二个国家，是这么扯淡吗？你整个地球还能找出第二个国家、第二个政府像这个样子搞吗？现在的武汉市就他妈的跟地狱一样，看到他们倒地死亡，或者说各种情况，那些悲剧。今天是大年初一啊，本来是一个非常高兴喜气的日子，这个时间段，但是眼下你觉得我们武汉人民或者说一个中国人能高兴得起来吗？
She has really lost control of the narrative, and he's struggling to get it back. Now, if that goes on, if they don't get on top of the virus, then that can really damage Xi's image, I think, even with ordinary Chinese people, and that has potentially profound implications because 2-3 years down the track, when he's meant to be reappointed, maybe his enemies will use this against him.
So the people directed this kind of dissatisfaction directly to Xi himself and Xi's style of governance, which is, I believe, the most serious threat to Xi Jinping. This is because the foundation of his power is based largely on populism, and the loss of this populist foundation will undoubtedly destabilize him.